Right, I'm Digital Native. I'm back with another video. I'm going to split this into a few parts just to keep them fairly short and sweet. Just means you can sort of get into whichever bit you want. What I'm going to have a look at in these is looking at using effect sends, but also taking that a little bit deeper and looking at how you can use other effects on top of that, how you can craft and sort of EQ or affect your FX send signal. I'm going to look at that on a few different areas. So I've got a bit of a basic setup of a track going here. I'm going to look at how you can do that with the piano, look at it on drums and also on vocals, and how you can use effect sends not only to sort of save on things like CPU and stuff like that, but also how you can craft the sound a little bit more and use that to help your mixers a little bit and just sort of blend things a little bit nicer and get your effects to sit around your music rather than clouding the music. So I'll get straight into it. So what I'm going to do is have a look at a piano to begin with. So I'm just going to play this piano loop, just a little piano part that I wrote. At the minute it's got a little bit of EQ on it, but that's not really sort of relevant to what we're doing today. I've just done that just to sweeten the sound up just a little bit, just for the purposes of this. Other than that, I've got no other effects switched on currently. There are some sends set up over there, but that channel is this piano reverb here. That's not actually switched on, so it's not doing anything. So at the minute, it sounds like this. So it sounds nice, but it's currently got no reverb on it. I feel like it could do with a bit of reverb just to put it in a bit of a space. So what I've done is I've just loaded up this reverb. So this is RAM, this is Native Instruments, this is a really nice one. It's got some real nice presets on it, but it's got a lot of settings on it that you can change and tweak just to get exactly the sound that you want. So I'm just going to switch that on. So that just adds a nice little bit of space. Nothing too crazy. Now, the main reason that I would probably not put a reverb on an insert usually, and why I would use a send, which I'm going to show in a minute, is because what's going to happen if you do that is that's actually affecting that signal overall. So that is sitting over the top of my piano, and anything after that is including both the reverb and the piano. So if there's anything about the reverb that I want to change or alter, or if it's clouding the sound a bit too much, I can EQ it afterwards by putting sort of another insert in, but really it's almost baked into the sound from that point. So you just get a bit less control. So what I might want to do in that instance is I might want to roll off some bottom end, because a lot of the time with the reverb, if you put that on, it's giving you a lot of reverb in the sort of lower mids and the low end, and you probably don't want that because that's going to cloud up your mix. So, you know, I could, I'll come to this one in a sec. I know that looks a bit mad. I could just put an EQ on there. Just going to go for stock Cubase EQ. So I could put an EQ on there and just roll off some of the bottom end. But if I then want to EQ out anything, if I feel like it's a bit muddy, it's added a bit of mud because of the reverb, anything I take out of that is also taking it out of the main signal. So I'm potentially losing something that I had in the first place that made it good, just because I've added a reverb to it to give it a bit of space. And I don't really want to do that. I want to kind of keep the essence of what made the piano sound nice in the first place. And often there's quite a lot of stuff in these sort of low mids in a piano that gives it its weight and its warmth. And that's also the bit that's going to give you a problem in the reverb. So if you start pulling that out, you're going to end up with something that's a little bit too thin, a bit too lifeless. You know, if I start cutting up too high, straight away it's sounding thin. So another option that we've got, I'm just going to turn that off. Stop that playing. So instead of doing that, what I can do is send my piano to a reverb send. So what I've done, just ignore these second two at the minute. First one, I've sent it to a reverb for the piano. All I've done is copied the exact same reverb over to the send channel, set up a send for that. So it's doing exactly the same thing. And if I just go onto the reverb channel. I'm just going to bypass those for a sec. So I've got the exact same reverb on there, and I've tried to level it up so it's doing exactly the same thing. So it's pretty much the same level of reverb that I had before, but now I've got it sent over there to that channel. I've sent it on pre-fade ascend, which means that it doesn't matter what I do to this. So later on in the mix, if I'm moving this about, it's not going to affect what's happening with that reverb. So that's a good idea. So if I go in there, same thing. I've got the same, like I say, the same reverb set up on there. But what I can do is then I can set this level to match what I want. So this is kind of acting as the wet dry in a way. And the only thing I changed on here was I turned the mix up to full. So if you're using ascend, you want it on full. So if I just mute that, go back to the original. That's about the same. So that's all good. I've got that sounding nice, but I'm in a similar position I was before. It sounds the same, only the difference is now I've got two separate channels. I've got my original channel for the piano, but I've now also got my reverb channel. So they're totally separate. That means that I can do whatever I want to this one without affecting the other one. So what I did was, if I go back in there and get all that crazy EQ, I applied this quite drastic EQ to it. Now, I've not done that because it makes it sound better. I've done that because it's what I've done is I've pulled out any sort of frequencies, key frequency areas within the piano where sort of specific notes were coming through. Because what they're going to do, that's creating some sort of like resonances, and they might sound nice in the piano, but if you're then feeding that into a reverb, that's going to start clouding things up and it's going to start sounding a bit nasty. So what I did was I found that the frequencies on there, and then all I did was I was then able to duplicate that over to my, let me just turn that off, over to my send channel. And I'm not sure, I mean, you know, different EQs have different settings. This one's got an invert function. So all I did was copy it over and then invert the frequency band. So I'll just find one that's on there that's in use, like that, for example. So all it's doing is it's inverting what I was boosting, and then it's cutting that out of the signal on the reverb. So if I play that now, it's now taking out all of this information from the reverb. That's with it off. And it just cleans it up a little bit. It takes out where some of those resonances are going to be, and it's going to help it sit in the mix a little bit more. I've also rolled off some of the bottom end as well. I mean, again, these are not hard and fast rules. This is just something that I've used as an illustration, and maybe I've gone a bit heavy-handed on some things, but you could definitely go high with the low cut. And likewise, you know, you may not choose to do it in these little sort of notches like this. Maybe you'll just have one band that's going to take it out as a sort of wide sweep. It's about finding what works, but what it is doing is it's removing some sound out of the signal. Equally, you go a bit further. You could say, right, well, actually, I want to change these to just take information out of the mids and then leave the sides, because obviously the mids is where you're going to have your drums and stuff like that. So it's going to help it sit there around the other elements in your mix as well. But obviously that's all going to be dependent on what's in your actual track. So that's one thing. We get to EQ it out and it just cleans it up. See, with it off, you're just getting way more of those mids. And it might sound nice on its own, but when it's in the track and with everything else, you're just going to get that build up. So that's essentially sort of stage one that I might do when I've got a reverb send. But what you can do as well, a couple of other things, you can add a compressor after that as well. So what I've done here is I've set up a compressor on my FX send channel. And what I'm doing is I'm feeding it. If I just go in here for the setup, I'm feeding it with the original piano signal. So what's going to happen is every time the piano plays, it's going to dip the reverb a bit, and then it's going to come back in. And what that does, that's going to allow for you to have potentially have your reverb a little bit bigger, a little bit louder. But then when the actual notes and the riff or the sort of the keys are playing, it's going to dip that reverb a little bit, help to focus the actual original source sound, whilst the reverb still sits around it or tails off at the end. So let's just have a listen to that. So you can see I'm going, it's taking quite a bit out. Again, this is all up to taste, and I've not gone, I've not gone too far in on this, and you tweak it to taste. If I just listen to that on its own. Just bypass it. So it's kind of taking off some of the transients of the sound in the reverb as well, which is also going to help to focus other things. You're not going to get anything sort of clouding the impact of whatever the sound is. And it's just kind of rushing back in afterwards, which is going to fill the space after it. And to someone listening to it, they're not going to notice that in the mix. So it's very subtle, but it just makes that extra little bit of difference. It's just that extra little bit of carving out a bit of space, pulling out something that maybe doesn't need to be there, that's not going to be clashing with something else. Because, piano is not going to be the only thing in that area, in that frequency range, and it's not going to be the only thing that you're wanting to put reverb on. So yeah, that's just something that I might do. I wouldn't always do it, but it's something that you can do. Another thing that you could do as well, because obviously we're on the topic of sidechaining and sort of sidechaining your effects and stuff. I've got the Waves F6 here, but if you've got another EQ, like another dynamic EQ that will do it, I'm just going to add this on. So what I've done again is I've fed the piano signal into that again. So what that's doing now, I've got that set up on here on a band in the middle. And so every time the piano hits now, what this is going to do is going to pull out, and I've set that to mid, so it's just going to pull out frequencies in that particular band or in that particular area, triggered by the original piano, only in the mids. Without. And again, these things are really subtle, and it's maybe hard to hear the impact that it's having, but overall, if it doesn't essentially sound different, the fact is it is actually pulling something out of it. It is getting rid of something, and that's all going to help when you've got a build-up of sounds. So, like I say, you can do that with the Waves F6. I like for doing that. I think you can do it with the Fab Filter EQ as well. So there's other things that you can do it with. And obviously, I'm not going to go through the settings too much, but essentially it's just a case of setting up a threshold. So we can see that's hitting there. I've pulled that down, so it's triggering and it's pulling it down by a certain range. So if I do a little listen on that. Again, you can hear that kind of pulling out the impact of the piano and then letting it come back in. And that's about it really. So they're just some things you can do. I wouldn't necessarily do every single one of them, because I think if you go too far and you do all of those things, then maybe you're going to lose too much of the life of what you're trying to achieve. But ultimately, these are all sort of tools and processes you can go to. If you're finding there's too much of something, I think you can go in with an EQ on the original sound and you can keep tweaking that because it's just, it's just clashing a bit, or there's just too much mud there. But actually, by having your effects and stuff on Ascend, it means that you can go in and tweak it on that. And often if you've got stuff that's got a lot of reverb on it, that's where you're going to be getting your problems from. If you turn all your reverbs off and you find that the mix sounds much cleaner and better and you're not getting that mud, chances are that's where it's coming from. So by setting it up in this way, you've got a few options of what you can do there. So that's it for pianos. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a look, and I'll do that in a separate video follow-up. I'm going to have a look at drums and how you can do a similar sort of thing on that, add in your effects to Ascend, the different sounds that you'll get by applying it in that way. Thanks for watching. If you're enjoying the videos that I'm doing, hit subscribe, give me a like. See you on the next one.